Hello everyone, and welcome to Slime Time. Finally, I bet you guys thought we would never get back to doing this again, right? Yeah, the original creator of Slime Time, Second Cat, was too busy to continue recording Slime Time for everyone, and it's actually been in hiatus for what feels like 6 months. As a result, most of the cast members are also not really part of this anymore, but I did manage to get a couple new people to join us. Say hello to Matthew Holland and Gloomy.
Hi. Hello, I'm Gloomy, aka Luke. Go by Luke for that.
Oh, okay, Luke then. Okay.
Matt is right here. I go by Ryu on the Dragon's Den forums.
Yes, and I am Tesla, also known in some channels as NeoFrodo38, for what it's worth. And I am going to temporarily take charge of the Slime Time podcast. If Psychic Cat ever feels like he wants to return, though, I will let him take charge again, because he is the original creator. For the time being, though, I am running things. And today we are actually going to be talking about localization, starting with Dragon Quest 1 upwards to Dragon Quest 9, I guess. I don't know if we're going to be covering the side games of the, Monster series or the Rocket Slime or Tornico series. It'll really depend on the feedback we get from doing these. So, until then, let's really go ahead and get started and talk about the initial Dragon Quest. Now, with its introduction, in America, things did not quite go so well, because when Dragon Quest was first released, there were plans to bring it over here, but there was a big snag with that, because the tagline, Dragon Quest, in America was actually owned by Wizards of the Coast, and they actually had a board game that was in publications that was called Dragon Quest. And we can't have two of the same thing in America due to copyright infringement. So it was in limbo for a while, until the creators actually decided to just give up on it and just make a new name for it. And it became Dragon Warrior over here. This would continue to be a thing up until, I believe it was Dragon Quest, right after Dragon Quest Monsters was released. And I think 1 year after that, Wizards of the Coast finally gave up on the copyright. And whoever was releasing Dragon Quest at the time bought up the copyright, and it got to become Dragon Quest in America again.
That was probably Square Enix by that time, because Dragon Quest was Dragon Warrior all the way up until 8.
Yes. Okay. That was indeed true. And after that, they had plans to release it into the States. And for medical purposes, they thought it would be a huge hit. They thought it was going to be the most groundbreaking game ever, since it was doing something new, something unique. Unfortunately, the fan reaction wasn't so good. People didn't really know how to take to this. They thought it was very weird, very clunky, it wasn't something that they really cared for. And the thing was bombing pretty bad. And Enix, who was releasing the game to the public, was taking a lot of losses as a result. Now, in this current events, they had one of two things they could have done. One, they could have just decided to stop making copies of Dragon Warrior and just give up on it. Or two, they could actually do a move of desperation and go to someone else and get them to advertise the game for them. The thing is that Enix really wasn't a very wealthy company at this time. In fact, they barely did anything as far as video games were concerned at this time. So, they decided to take a gamble, which would actually be one of the most riskiest gambles that any corporation's ever done. They took every penny they had and went to Nintendo and actually paid them a good chunk of cash to advertise their game, Nintendo Power. On top of that, they weren't even really selling the game with Nintendo Power. If you subscribed to Nintendo Power, you would get not only Dragon Warrior, not only the Warrior's Handbook with Dragon Warrior, but you got maps that Enix paid to create out of their own money for free by subscribing to Nintendo Power. Now, Enix would get half the cut from the Nintendo Powers that they were selling that came with, but it was still a big gamble, because this might not have paid off as much as they thought it did. But thankfully, it did pay off. When people found out about Dragon Warriors through Nintendo Power, they were ecstatic over it. It was selling big time. So that is one thing that Enix is really well known for. That's actually how I first actually found out about it, was through Nintendo Power. And that's why I know this, because it is one of those situations where I just honestly didn't know what to think about it at the time, but I love the game. I don't know if you guys ever experienced Dragon Warrior 1 this way. Do you have anything to add?
I actually played Dragon Warrior 1 on my Game Boy Color and Super Game Boy when I had it.
So you played the Game Boy remake of it, I take it.
Yep. I never played the Nintendo remake, and I tried a couple times the emulation, but I just really couldn't get into it. I played through the Game Boy remake because when I got it, I got Dragon Warrior 1 and 2. I think there was a guide for it, I can't remember. I know I got 3 at the same time, and I got the guide for 3, and I got the Pokemon Yellow Game Boy Color bundle. I got all that at the same time, and it was glorious.
Yeah, I remember that.
Honestly, I played through 3 after playing a little bit of 1 and a little bit of 2. I think I stopped playing 2 after Canox Prince got sick and you had to save him or some crap like that. I just kind of stopped there, and then 1, I couldn't, honestly, I didn't mind it, but I kept messing up with torches and jump, so I just kind of went, oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the next episode, when we get into Dragon Quest 2, I'm actually going to cover that, believe me. But yeah, Luke, do you have any experience with that?
Well, in Europe, we didn't actually get the Dragon Warrior or Quest games until Dragon Quest 8 came out over here. So that was the first big initiative there. It's surprising, actually, considering the landscape of Europe and the fandoms that exist here. I mean, in France, Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump and all that stuff are huge. The same with Italy as well, as that sort of thing. And so I think that given the connection there to his artwork on the boxes, they could have easily sold some stuff. But then you've also got to keep in mind that Europe at that time was the land of the home computer, and that console games weren't such a big thing over here anyhow. Up until about the time the Mega Drive comes out, that's when we first started getting a lot of big console stuff. So the NES wasn't so popular. Sorry, dog's making noise there. The NES wasn't so popular here, so we didn't really get Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest. We still haven't got the first Dragon Quest, in fact. So anyone who would have wanted it would have had to import one of the Game Boy remakes, I would think.
Let me get into that real quick. I've always noticed that Europe got different games than we did and vice versa, but one thing about Dragon Quest is that, now this is all speculation on the devs' part, but I tend to agree with it myself, especially considering Square Enix's track record. When they released Dragon Quest 1 on Android and iOS, in Japan, and a couple enterprising folks got it here. They found out at the end of it that there were a lot of English-based stuff in the credits. And I'm thinking, like they are, that we're going to get pretty much every single mobile release of Dragon Quest, and that will probably be Europe's first taste of Dragon Quest 1 when that time comes.
Okay. That's actually very interesting, because when they actually talked about bringing Dragon Quest 1 back over here, like when the original creator of Slime Time, Second Cat, actually thought that when he was advertising the Dragon Quest trilogy, that the anniversary collection that they had in Japan, he figured that meant that they were bringing that over, but it never happened.
And they brought it over on a system that, for all intents and purposes, was dead here. The Wii died a good little bit ago, and I think the main reason why Nintendo stopped publishing a lot of anyone's games near the end there, started focusing on the Wii U and its stuff, is because it is really, really easy to model Wii. It's like the easiest system. All you need, at least when I did it, now you need a copy of Smash Brothers, but all you needed was an SD card and done. So I honestly didn't think there were going to be Fortune Street over here. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, that one definitely was a surprise to see something like Fortune Street come over, especially because you would think that something like the Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 collection would be a lot more appealing than Fortune Street, which is like this weird Monopoly game. But I suppose Fortune Street had the boon of having Nintendo characters in it, so that's something, I mean, those always do well. Mario Monopoly.
Nah, Dragon Lord was a dick in that game anyway.
I don't know why, but when I read his quote, and he was doing the evil laugh, I was thinking, am I the only one that imagined him doing the Mandark laugh?
Barracus does the same thing in Dragon Warrior 3, and then he says, "I will feast on thine innards."
Yeah, I'm just like, when I saw that laugh, I still imagined him talking like Mandar, like with that laugh. That would have been hilarious, by the way, if he would have done that.
Yeah, they need to get some voiceovers back, huh? It's been absent since 8, they haven't had any of the voices. So, I mean, that could have been something, but, I mean, that's effort, and, you know, I mean, it would probably take to go into those ROMs, and, you know, especially with the SNES versions, of the Super Famicom versions of those games being on the disc, that would take some effort to go in and retranslate, and you know, as you said, the Wii was in a different sort of situation in America than it was in Japan, and Japan also had the bonus, I suppose, of having the Dragon Quest X materials on that CD, so people would have went out to buy it just to see that, one would assume.
Speaking of, that brings us to the second thing that we just need to talk about. Changes in the core storyline from Dragon Quest to Dragon Warrior. Now, if you were like me, and you paid for Ninja Power subscription, you got the Adventurer's Handbook. Now, in the very back of the Adventurer's Handbook, there was actually a small story that explains the origin of the game you were playing. And to say that this game was like Disney meets Dr. Seuss is very blunt, because I did not know about how different this actually was until I played the remake for Game Boy way later. But the reason that the changes were so different was that Nintendo, back during the NES era, was extremely bad about censorship. Really bad. And the original Dragon Quest game was very based around demonology, like instead of them being called monsters, they were like it's called demons in the original Japanese version. So they changed that. They changed the Draco Lord from being this demon lord who could control dark magic to being this old man who was just very spiteful, very mean-spirited. And he found this dragon inside this mountain cave. Probably the same mountain cave they actually go to in the game, and he actually obeys him like he was a pet or something. Like, I suppose in that sense, the Dragon Lord is actually the first real monster tamer you see in the series, if you're going by the American translation. Which means the first monster tamer in Dragon Quest was a villain. I'll just let that sink in for a minute. And Matthew Holland is actually off mic for a second, so he'll be right back though. But moving on, there was a big difference between Dragon Quest Dragon Warrior in terms of the story, and that's that everything felt so much underhanded. I mean, it didn't really bother me. I mean, I could enjoy the game regardless, but there were a lot of people that were upset by this, because things felt so much less epic now, because this guy that you end up fighting was so underwhelming. I mean, he was an old man who knew magic, of course, and the Orb of Light was making him stronger as a result, but he's just an old man, and being a legendary hero, you take him down rather easily. And after that, you just fight this giant dragon. It's kind of the generic swordsman versus dragon, knight versus dragon storyline that Americans are kind of used to. And it just felt so underwhelming as a result, whereas in the original Japanese version, the giant dragon you fight is actually the Dragon Lord, only in a new advanced form. And because it's the Dragon Lord, you honestly feel like it's so much more... Like you can feel how powerful he's become, and you use all your strength and strategy to take him out. It was a very valiant victory. And I feel for the fans that were upset by this, because they're right. With the translation differences, it was very different for a lot of people. And difference isn't always bad, but in this case, because of the censorship problems, Americans didn't get to experience the true splendor of the origin of Dragon Quest until much later on. Because they actually brought back the old origin story when the Game Boy Color game was ported over. However, this actually was another problem. You see, people in America were already used to what the original gave us. So when they bought the one for Game Boy Color, or if they actually emulated the Super Nintendo Famicom versions that were pretty much the same, just with better graphics. But anyway, if you played either of those ports, then you would be confused and scratching your head at how different they actually were. So that was a major problem. And they didn't really do a very good job of explaining the differences very well either. Especially with the name changes, which is the third subject we have to talk about. Oh, the name changes for Dragon Quest 1. I actually forget what the original names were called, but when they localized this game to America, the name of Elfgard for the world was pretty much the same, but everything else was changed. The main castle was called Tantagel in the one we've got. Cole was pretty much the same. Trying to think. Breckenary? I don't remember if that was the same, but Garenham, I'm pretty sure wasn't the same. Cantland wasn't the same.
Well, Hurt and Moore were supposed to be Fireball and Firebane.
Yeah, I've actually heard about that. Hurt and Hurtmore. I'm usually not one to complain when spell names are very simplistic, but yeah, that was pretty bad. Like it's nowadays it's hilariously bad, but
it's better. It's better than Prince.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. But let's see. I'm trying to think what other things were changed. They also changed a lot of the people names. Like, the king is now called Lorik, where he was called Lars in the original. Princess Laura was changed to Gwendolyn, because Gwendolyn sounds more Arthurian than Laura, I guess. And the hero's name was changed from Roto to Erdrick, because Erdrick sounds more heroic, you see. Yeah, it was shameless, but, well, a lot of things were shameless in the original, so I'll give it a pass. Also, the biggest thing that I think that people were really concerned about is the translation of the different enemies and whatnot. But I actually did a wiki search and asked around about this, and the monster names seem to be around the same. I think the only real difference is that the Axe Knight was actually supposed to be the Armor Knight, and the Armor Knight was supposed to be the Hell Knight. They changed the name because, again, Nintendo and censorship, they were having the term Hell Knight just would not be kosher for them, so they had to change the names around. This would later be changed in the Game Boy Color release. They actually called him, I think, Hades Knight. I think. I'm trying to remember. But it's pretty much the same, though. And I think I heard in the original, the Red Dragon was actually called King Dragon. But for some reason, this wasn't ever changed back in the future releases. I don't know why, but that's apparently the only real big differences between the two versions as far as translation goes. The one thing I was the most surprised about is the system changes from the Famicom version to the NES version. Okay, first of all, the graphics in the Famicom version look terrible by comparison. Like, they just look ugly as crap, even for NES standards. It looked like they were barely coming off from Atari graphics, to be honest. Now, the NES version, sprites look a lot better. They are more proportional. They actually look like the way they're supposed to look. They don't have jerky movement either. Like, you can actually see them moving around, shaking their bodies and whatnot. And when they turn, their bodies turn too. So that was a very nice touch. Also, there was no battery backups in the Famicom version. I believe you still had to use passwords.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you have to do a little poem. They called it in the game, I think, or a song or something, a prayer maybe, and that would restore your progress.
Yeah, that was a welcome change. I always preferred backup saves over passwords, so that was very helpful. The NES version did have one minor problem, though. Whenever you turned off the game, you had to hold down the reset button and the power button. Because if you did not, then the battery saves would sometimes mess up, and your data could be screwy. either it would be glitched or it would just downright be deleted. So you had to be careful of that. I think this carried on up until the 5th game of the Super Nintendo, where it was no longer an issue. Although you still saw people do it anyway.
Even still, in the instruction manual for Dragon Quest V, they have a little caricature of Bianca reminding the hero to hold down the reset button when he's turning off the console. It's pretty cute.
And that's something people would always mess up on. And that's something that I would occasionally forget when I was a kid. And whenever my dad would get messed up, I'd be like, crap! I spent 10 hours on that quest, man. Oh well.
Wah, 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 wah.
Indeed. Other minor changes was that we actually had color backgrounds for the battles, whereas in the original Famicom version, all you saw was a black background and the monster sprite. That was kind of, like, the extra color and backgrounds really did add a lot more inversion to the game. Inversion? Is that the term I'm looking for here? Immersion! There we go. Inversion. Yeah, you got more immersed into the game when you could actually see the backgrounds and back the monsters. That's going to be a minor rant when we get to the next game of the series, but the first game did it really well. And I'm really hard-pressed to find anything else that they really changed in terms of how the system worked. But I think another minor change is that the sound effects were much updated in this one. Because they, when you cast magic, they had this little flashing... I can only describe it as kind of a flashing ring sound that they added to the NES version to make it all magical and enchanted and stuff. Whereas in the original Famicom, you basically just heard a click whenever a spell got cast, and yeah, it wasn't the same. Also, colors. Whenever you were low on health in the NES version, the screen would actually go red, or pink, to start off with. And if you ever died, the screen would flash red, which is supposed to signify just how powerful the enemy is. I always loved that. Like in the original Dragon Warrior, when if an enemy killed you, and you just saw this big flashing red that hit you, it's almost to say, oh, that hurt. And I don't know, it's just little things like that that just make the overall experience just so much more gratifying. And I don't know, it just to me felt really good. Now, the last thing that I think the game was really good about, or shall I say, good about changing, was the new dialogue. Yeah, the original Japanese version, from what I can tell, had very normal speaking dialogue. It wasn't really anything... The style of speaking wasn't any different than the speaking we're using now. This was much different than the one we got, though, whereas they were using more of a Elizabethan dialect for a lot of their speaking words, and I don't know of anyone who actually was put off by this, but a lot of people found it kind of an odd decision. Personally, I thought it was great, because the world in which they're living in does look like it's reflecting, like, Arthurian times, or Victorian times at the very least. So seeing them speaking in the Elizabethan dialect does make sense to me. To me, it just sounds like the type of way they would be talking back then. And a lot of things, a lot of the people you talk to, it really fits. I especially love how everything sounds so much more epic with a lot of these characters. Like when you talk to the wizard in the castle, that heals your MP. Like he gives you this epic speech about how the chosen one will lead us to victory, and I'm just like, dude, I'm just here to heal my MP. You don't have to like keep saying that. And I'm just like this guy, this old guy, is so he's so into this when he's healing your MP, and I just thought that was amazing. Also, this game has one of the most notorious and hilarious lines of any Dragon Quest game. Whenever you rescue the princess, she says that if you go bring her back to the castle and you talk to her, she has 3 things she can say. And one of those things is, "Dost thou love me?" And it's a yes or no prompt. If you say yes, then she's all happy and smiles, and you hear this very happy sound effect, which I think is adorable. However, if you say no, then she says, "But thou must."
And then she just says it over and over.
And then she just brings the prompt back. And if you keep saying no, then she just says, "But thou must." I was like, oh my god. This is hilarious. Like the fact that he can't keep her from just saying it over and over again. Because I've tried to see if that would ever end, like if the event ever had a conclusion to it, but no. It keeps going, no matter how many times you do it. And
yeah, it's a pretty cute solution to the problem of, having to just pick yes. Like, it wants you to pick yes, but, it's a pretty nice way of making you pick yes in the end. It's kind of sweet, I suppose, the approach they took to it.
I don't know if the other players felt this way, but I just felt this as remember, they're using Elizabethan dialect, and this game looks like that it maybe takes place in Victorian times. And if you know anything about the Victorian times, princesses were miserable. Like, they led very miserable lives. So I always saw this as her being, very desperate for someone to, appreciate her. So I just imagined her, saying, "But thou must." And she's I just imagine her having this desperate voice. And I'm just I felt so sorry for her knowing that. And, here's something that a lot of people don't know about, though. The same thing can actually happen at the end of the game. Because at the end of the game, when you defeat the Dragon Lord and save everyone, she wants you to marry her, and if you say no, then she brings the prompt back. And she will keep doing it until you agree to marry her. And I was like, oh my god, you are stuck with her now, dude. And, also, I did not know about this, but you can actually rescue the princess and actually take her with you to fight the Dragon Lord. And you will actually get an extended dialogue scene from the Dragon Lord if you do so. And I am just, I'm just overwhelmed at that. Just really? They actually put enough thought into the game, at least in the American version, and they planned for this. They knew that some players would eventually try to take the princess to the Dragon Lord, and they had dialogue planned for it. That's just brilliant. Yeah, the American dialogue was really thought out. I thought it was really good. Well, how do you two feel about it, though?
I like the style of it generally. I think it's kind of cute, the thous and these and everything. I agree with you that it's nice to see these little scenes in there for someone who's going to take the time to do something special in the game. It's always nice when a game rewards you like that, and I think the Dragon Quest games are particularly good at that. That if you search out something, you'll find something fun in the end. If you go to the effort, you'll find something nice to reward you for that. So I think that's good, especially for a game like this where you're going to be spending a lot of time playing it and perhaps playing it again and again. You'd like there to be situations that you've come across that you wouldn't have come across on your first playthrough. So I think that's pretty good. And yeah, I mean, I like all the Shakespearean style voices, the Elizabethan dialogue in there. It's kind of fun because it jives well with the princesses and castles theme there, you know, and with the names especially as well. Very Camelot-esque, I suppose.
And aside from that, I think we pretty much covered most of the localization. I think the only other thing I can really think of to mention is the fact that the ending was, in the original, was very, very... again, I'm going by the wikis and stuff that I've read up on, since no one seems to be telling me otherwise, but from what I can gather, though, the ending to the original Famicom version was very, very bland. Because I guess with the limited technology on the Famicom, they didn't really have the capabilities for fluid movement. So it's basically equal to the prince talking to the king, and the king telling him that he has saved the land, and that's it. And then the credits roll, and there's no him marrying the princess, there's no them blowing the trumpets, there's just the credits rolling. And I'm just gonna throw it out there. I think the American version did a really good job showing the ending, like how triumphant you are. I really like that. It's actually been a running theme for Dragon Quest overall, because I think starting with Dragon Quest V, that's the game that started you talking to everyone after the game ends, and everyone is showing how appreciative they are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you get to go on a sort of a victory tour of all the areas you've been to before. It's a good, fun thing to do at the end of DQ5. Certainly, I think the thing that really shows with the Nintendo version, the American version of Dragon Warrior, is that they had a lot of time to take notes from what they'd done in the years coming up to, at least, because there was a bit of a gap between its release in Japan and then the American localization. So in that time, they had worked on Dragon Quest II and Dragon Quest III, and so you would see some of the influence of that bleeding over into this, what's ostensibly sort of an augmentation of the first Dragon Quest game. So it kind of borrows a little bit from those other games, maybe with the extra doodads at the end there.
And I think that's pretty much it. So, finishing thoughts. What do you guys think?
Dragon Quest I started a dynasty, for better or for worse. And to be honest, I'm really disappointed that some people in a foreign country, even though there's obviously fans of it here, prefer that just not exist here for some reason.
Well, I'm going to say to everyone out there who might be feeling a little bit blue about all this recent Dragon Quest silence, to keep the hope alive. You know, things will happen eventually when you least expect it. The slime will draw near, and you'll be able to whip out your miracle sword and slash it up for all that lovely health that you might get, or whatever else it is. So, you know, keep on crossing those fingers, and something good might happen. But as for Dragon Quest I love it. It's a fun game that you can kind of pick up anytime, and because it's so familiar to you, you can sort of blast through it. I did it recently with the phone version that came out there on the Google Play Store, so that was great to just kind of pick up and go through again. And I love grinding slime.
Yeah, I actually really love the first Dragon Quest, even the NES version. It's just, to me, I have such fond nostalgia for it. I could play it 100 times and still not get bored of it. That's just how memorable it actually was as an RPG. And we really probably wouldn't have the RPGs we have in the States had it not been for Dragon Warrior. So I always give it the credit it deserves. But I think we've pretty much talked about everything we need to talk about. I am Tesla Then 38. I'm waiting for you guys to sign off.
Oh. This is Matt, and I'm 27.
Oh, this is Luke. I'm had a great time being here, guys. I hope you guys had a good time too, and I'll see you for Dragon Quest 2 in a few weeks.
And this is Slime Time, signing off.